Imagine living 18 years looking only at the ground, not because you wanted to, but because something invisible, a cruel weight, had bent your life in half. This is the story of a woman whose struggle was recorded in the Gospel of Luke. Think about it. A decade and a half without lifting her head, without gazing at the sky, without seeing the stars, or even looking people in the eye. What do you think went through her mind all that time? It wasn't just physical suffering that tortured her. It was also the emotional isolation and social rejection that came with it. At that time, many conditions like hers were seen as direct consequences of sin or curses. How many times must she have heard whispers behind her back or even direct accusations blaming her for her own situation? The Bible reveals that her condition went far beyond a physical ailment. Luke 13 tells us she had a spirit of infirmity, something spiritual that kept her captive. This raises an important question. How many invisible battles are we fighting without recognizing their true origin? This woman, bent to the point of being unable to stand up straight, wasn't just battling an illness. There was something evil, a spirit that literally twisted her body and likely tried to destroy her soul. Imagine her daily routine. Every morning, the same suffering. Every day, the same impossibility of doing simple things like standing upright or working with dignity. There's something even more painful. In a society that valued appearances and purity so much, she was likely seen as impure or unworthy. How many times must she have pleaded with God for relief? How many silent tears must have fallen as she tried to find some trace of hope? Then on a certain Sabbath, everything changed. It was a day like any other, and she went to the synagogue, as she likely did regularly. After all, where else could she find some comfort, even if only by hearing the scriptures? But this wouldn't be an ordinary Sabbath. On this day, Jesus was there. His presence would transform her life in a way she could never have imagined. Jesus saw her. Think about that for a moment. Among a crowd of people, he noticed this woman who for years might have gone unnoticed, and he didn't just see her, he called her. Imagine what that moment must have been like. A woman who likely avoided drawing attention to herself was invited by the Master himself. What do you think went through her mind? Was it fear? Was it hope? Perhaps a mixture of both. When she approached, Jesus didn't ask her anything. He didn't demand explanations or proof of faith. He simply said, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." With those words, he released her from 18 years of pain and oppression. But it wasn't just that. He touched her, a gesture that, at that time, carried immense significance. Many would have avoided touching someone considered impure. But Jesus broke that barrier. His touch not only healed her body, but restored her dignity. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, she stood up straight. Imagine what that means. An upright posture isn't just a physical change, it's a declaration of freedom. And the first thing she did was glorify God. She knew this wasn't just a miracle. It was an act of divine love. But surprisingly, not everyone was happy about what happened. The synagogue leader was indignant. He didn't deny the miracle, but chose to focus on what he saw as a violation of the law. Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. See the irony in this. That man, who was supposed to represent divine compassion and justice, was more concerned with rules than with the liberation of a life. This is where Jesus does something even more powerful. He confronts the hypocrisy directly. He points out that even on the Sabbath, everyone takes care of their animals, untying them to let them drink water. So why shouldn't this woman, a daughter of Abraham, be freed from her suffering on the day of rest. With this declaration, Jesus not only defended his action, he restored the woman's identity. By calling her a daughter of Abraham, he reminded her and everyone around her that she was part of God's covenant. She wasn't an outcast or condemned. She was an heir to divine promises. Think about how this applies to our lives today. How often do we bend under the weight of our own battles? How often do we believe our suffering is punishment or that we're not worthy of God's attention? This story shows us that Jesus sees us. Even when we feel invisible, he notices. Even when we think our suffering is insignificant, he cares. This passage also challenges us to reflect on how we respond to the suffering of others. Are we like Jesus, seeking to ease people's burdens? Or are we like the synagogue leader, so bound by rules or prejudices that we become insensitive to others' pain? And what about the weight you carry? Maybe it's not a physical problem like hers, but something invisible that has been making you walk bent over. It could be guilt, a wound from the past, or even a feeling that you're not enough. If that's your reality, know this: Jesus is still calling. He's still saying, you are set free. This woman's story reminds us that no suffering is too long and no chain is too strong for God's power to break. But it also challenges us to take action. When Jesus calls us, it's up to us to stand up and glorify God. Now, I ask you, what will you do with the freedom he offers? This story is an invitation for you to leave the weight behind and start walking upright, with your eyes fixed on the heavens. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this. It might be exactly what they need to find hope and freedom.